So today we're discussing dynamics in interpersonal relationships as well as close relationships. Relationships are bonds reflected in interactions and perceptions of patterns. So we're going to discuss then different relationship characteristics. The first, the content of the interactions are what people talk about and do together. You may share similar interests in terms of the content of your interactions. Maybe both you and your significant other are Phillies fans and you enjoy going to baseball games and watching them on television. The diversity of interactions are the different experiences people have together. Maybe not only do you enjoy the Phillies with your partner, but also you share a religion in common, and you also go to films together, and you also work out and go jogging. So you might value your relationship because of the diversity of the interactions, that you have many different things that you experience together. The qualities of the interactions are an aspect of relationship characteristics. So maybe you do all of these cool things together, but while you're doing them, you fight. So this can have, the quality can have an effect on your perception of the relationship. So while the content of the interactions might be great, you have similar interests, the quality of those interactions could be bad. Like if you're fighting while you're doing those activities, like at the Phillies game. The relative frequency of the interactions gauge whether interactions are repetitive or varied. So you might value your relationship because someone is trustworthy or you can count on them is a better example. But if they are repetitive type activities or interactions, you might call that person boring. Similarly, you might appreciate a relationship because you have a variety of experiences, or you with a significant other. At the same time, that person who might be exciting and provide a variety of different interactions might not be as dependable. You don't see them as much, even though when you see them, it is very exciting and varied uh, type of interactions. So the nature of the interactions can have an effect on how you evaluate your relationship. The quality of power in the interactions gauge whether the partners agree on the power distribution. And this can be like shared across different domains. For example, you and your partner might agree that your spouse handles the children, takes the children to school, and you don't question when he decides to leave in the morning or how he dresses the kids. But when it comes to finances, maybe you as the female want to control that aspect of the relationship, and you decide when you pay the bills, how much to allot in your 401k or what have you. So you might have an agreement about which aspects of your relationship a specific partner kind of takes the lead. Or you might have a relationship where one of the two partners is always taking the lead and making the decisions, and the other is checking with him or her or they. So the quality of power in the interactions gauge whether the partners agree on the power distribution. In some cases, we might have a partner that we clash with because, let's say, I want to be able to make this decision and my partner disagrees with me constantly about the decisions that I make. And this can be have a negative outcome in relationships because we don't agree on the power of the interactions. One person makes a decision and the other person undercuts them or doubts their decision. The intimacy of the interaction gauges the amount of self disclosure. Self disclosure makes relationship partners feel closer, and we expect a level of reciprocity with that. If I self disclose, if I share with you a personal story, I have a expectation that you would share a personal story back with me at some point. Now, when you don't self disclose back to me, I feel a little bit like you're hiding something or it affects our relationship growth, generally speaking. The partner's perceptions of the interactions gauge whether they agree with their places in the world and their respective worldviews. So it's not that, for example, there's something wrong or right about being repetitive versus being varied in our types of interactions. It's that what the partner's expectations are. So maybe her prior partner was very exciting, did lots of different cool things, was flexible, and could change plans on a whim seamlessly without getting worked up or an argument ensuing. Maybe their current partner is more regimented, likes to do activities according to a plan, and does get worked up if the plans change and is not flexible. Now, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way to be, because I might perceive that person as inflexible. You might perceive that person as dependable, and you like that they keep to a schedule and a plan. So the perceptions of the interactions here dictate our evaluation of the relationship, right? It's not that any of these behaviors are wrong or right. It's that, do they match my perceptions of how things should be? The commitment reflected in the interactions also gauge our how closely our interactions fit our ideal. Some partners are good seeing each other once per week or several times per week. Others expect to be totally in our lives in every decision and in every moment. Uh, and we may argue as a couple about that commitment level. So we form relationships due to appearance, like how attractive someone is, to similarity, like how well we get along with them, our similar interests, due to complementarity. For example, if I am strong in one area and my spouse is weak in one area, um, that might trigger some kind of attraction. Like, for example, if I'm not too intelligent, I might be very attracted to my spouse because they are super intelligent, whereas I'm maybe physically strong. She might be attracted to me because of that reason. Maybe she is not as physically strong and is attracted to that aspect of me. I might form a relationship due to rewards. For example, if a friend of mine has a yacht, I might hang out with them because I get to hang out on a yacht sometimes. Due to competency, I might develop a friendship with somebody who is competent in their domain. Like if I join a real estate group online and I meet someone who has done a bunch of real estate projects. I might seek friendship with them because I perceive them to be good at what they do. We also form relationships due to proximity. For example, you're more likely to be friends with your neighbor than some person you haven't ever come across in real life, and due to disclosure. For example, when I share a personal story with someone and they share a personal story back, we are more likely to form a relationship and a bond. Social exchange theory gauges our expectations. So if you rub my back, I will rub yours, is the concept here. When we reciprocate, and in terms of disclosure and in terms of building rapport and friendship, we begin to bond. Costs are the negatives and rewards are the positives in any relationship. In our close relationship, we might measure the costs and rewards of staying in it versus leaving. The comparison levels are the individual's expectations derived from a variety of sources. So my spouse might leave me because he or she sees how great a friend's relationship appears to be on the internet, and our relationship is not as good. And due to a comparison, my spouse decided to leave me for someone else. Comparison levels, of course, exist for alternatives. For example, the costs and rewards of the current relationship compared to the possibility of doing better in another one. Secretly, my spouse in that prior example maybe has thought or also seen an ex and how well they're doing on in their career, and decided to leave me because of that reason. Wholeness means you can't understand a system by simply picking it apart, particularly from afar, which means that because relationships are dynamic systems, as an outsider, you might look at your friend's relationship and say, why are you with him? He's not attractive and he is not good to you. But the friend of yours in the relationship might say, you don't know what it's like when we're together. When we're alone, he's amazing. He's so nice to me. And he has a great job and he's a great kisser. And you don't see those things about him um, because you just see him once a month at some kind of social event where he acts like a jerk. So, wholeness is this phenomena that if you just concentrate on the negative part of the relationship, you're not seeing the entirety of the relationship. And outsiders can't really understand the relationship because they haven't lived it. Interdependence builds on the notion of wholeness by asserting that members of a system depend on and affect each other. So, in this system, in this relationship, we take on different roles and we depend on and affect each other based on our decisions or roles that we play. And this is what makes breaking up difficult because we are interdependent with someone. We might share a child, we might share finances. I might have to see them in our friend group in the future, which would make me uncomfortable um, because our paths will continue to cross. Calibration centers on how systems set their parameters, check on themselves, and self correct. So, a well functioning system has moments where I can check in with my partner and say, are you okay with that decision that I made? I had to make it quickly. I just want to make sure you're not upset about the decision. We can change our mind if you want. And that would, of course, be generally thought to be positive calibration when two partners discuss the decisions that they've made and any changes that need to be made thereafter. Equifinality refers to the ability to achieve goals by a variety of means. My spouse can get me to take the trash out a variety of ways. One is to yell at me to take the trash out. The second is to take the bag out of the trash and put it by the door. In that way, they are signaling to me that I should take the trash out, but we don't get in a shouting match about it because they have not yelled at me. In both instances, the trash got taken out. One way avoided more of an escalatory argument because he or she merely took the bag out themselves and put it by the door rather than yelling at me. Autonomy and connection gauges independence versus partnership. So we have an inherent need or want to be autonomous, to be free to make our own choices. And we have the simultaneous dynamic of wanting to seek connection in others. So we want freedom, but we want connection. And this makes for a confusing dynamic relationship that occurs in all of us. Openness and protection gauges the desire to disclose versus the desire to withhold information. So we want to be open. We in some instances want to share, but we withhold information because we don't feel safe sometimes sharing information. So maybe a prior partner, we shared information and they used it against us in a fight, and now we are very reserved about opening up. Another dynamic is the novelty and predictability dynamic, which gauges excitement versus stability. Like novelty and newness are great unless, for example, it's your spouse and he is jumping from one job to another every 3 months because he just doesn't like the job or isn't predictable enough. So the newness, the novelty dynamic might be great for a fling that you're having, but not great for a spouse who is always into trying new things or doing new things and is not predictable, you can't count on this person to get up and go to work every day. So while we enjoy excitement, we also value stability that comes with predictability. Judgment and acceptance gauges criticism versus forgiveness. So in our relational dynamics, we measure or decide when to be judgmental about a spouse or loved one and when to be accepting. And we're not always judgmental and we're not always accepting. In most cases, we're both, depending on the context and the situation. If we're overly judgmental, and belittling our significant other, our close relationship, often that person might get worn down and leave. If we're overly accepting, if we believe everything they say to us at all times and aren't thinking critically, then they might leave because they think we're weak. We're too weak. So there is a relational dynamic at play versus when to be in terms of when to be judgmental and when to be accepting of our partner. Another relational dynamic is the affection versus instrumentality dynamic. So, affection is in and of itself enjoyable. If you really like someone and being around them, that is the affection end of the spectrum. And instrumentality is you like what they do and the lifestyle that they provide for you in some cases. So, maybe you really were affectionate for your prior boyfriend, but your husband is, you don't love him as much and doesn't drive you as crazy as your prior relationship, but he has a solid job, he's great with the kids, and makes a great husband material. So this is the dynamic which is on a spectrum between pure affection and instrumentality. And most of the friendships that we hold are somewhere on that spectrum between affection and instrumentality. For example, we might really like the person, but also it's cool that they have Sixers tickets and we get to go to the Sixers game from time to time, which is the instrumentality part of the relationship. Additional relational dynamics include the public and private lives. So we might weigh whether or not to be public in our relationship. Like, I might enjoy posting to Instagram about my family, whereas my partner may not like that part and prefer to be private about our relationship. So we have a dynamic where we measure or gauge when to be public about aspects of our relationship and when to be private. Finally, the last dynamic is the ideal versus the real. So everybody in their mind has the ideal partner, how they behave, the career they have, how they are with the children or my family, versus the real. And of course, real people have are not perfect, right? So in our decision making, do we stay in this relationship or do we leave? We're looking at what our ideal partner, our ideal friend is like versus how this person really is, and whether it's good enough to stay in that close relationship. The last thing we'll discuss today are the stages of relational development. This is a KNAPS model of relational development, and this looks at the coupling and the breaking up process. So, initiating is when two people notice one another and express they are interested in making contact. I might initiate a conversation with someone I find attractive. Short term attraction propels us into initiating, and long term attraction sustains relationships. So I have began that conversation because I think the person is attractive. And then over time, I'm trying to learn whether or not we are compatible. Do I respect this person? Are they smart? Are they nice? Are they worth pursuing beyond a simple conversation? Experiment is when we gather information about each other via small talk. So we'll have small talk conversations. There's nothing deep disclosed here, but maybe just some banter or superficial comments about the weather or some kind of shared experience. Intensifying is when intimacy levels increase. This is when, we're information dumping. We are potentially becoming physical, touching each other, and generally building rapport and self-disclosing a lot and hoping for reciprocity when we self-disclose. Integrating is when we are coupling. We're not only conversating and getting along with each other, we're now doing things together, like going on a date. Bonding is when we are telling the world about us. This is, um, I'm updating my Facebook page to say I'm in a relationship. Differentiating may initiate the unraveling process from we to I, um, where I was saying on my Facebook page, we are a couple. Maybe when we go out to dinner, my significant other and I, she might say, well, he likes to watch basketball every night, but I don't like that. So, this is a differentiating aspect of relational development. And when you differentiate in that manner, you're kind of creating a barrier and it can begin the unraveling process when it's no longer a we, it's a here's what he does, here's what I do, and we're different that way. Um, Instead of turning towards each other, we turn away. There's some data, some studies on that. Circumscribing is when we are restraining communication behaviors. In this aspect, in this stage, silences occur and fewer topics are raised. This means we, maybe there's a fight, and the best way to move forward is to not talk about the issue at hand. Or I might know it's a touchy subject to talk about my partner's, let's say, father, and I refrain from doing that because I know that it might trigger some animosity or drama. So that is circumscribing, when I restrain my communication behaviors with my partner or friend. Stagnating is when we are in a rut. So the relationship just feels maybe boring. We're not going anywhere. We're not really getting along. Avoiding is the second to last stage, when we try not to see each other. Maybe I move out of the house. And terminating is deciding I want to get a divorce.